Hey friends, I wanted to film a very quick introduction to this video. The quality of this introduction is not very good because I'm currently filming it on Zoom because I wanted to talk about this episode, how this is going to be the last What Would You Do episode of 2024. We will resume these episodes hopefully January 2025 or sometime early next year, but this is the last one of the year and I really hope you enjoy it. If you are not familiar with this series on my channel, it's called What Would You Do Occult Edition. And basically I have gathered various content creators from all over the world, all different time zones, all different practices, from witchcraft to folk magic to ceremonial magic to chaos magic to all different magical paradigms. We are coming together to talk spell work and magic. So I present these magical scenarios and each practitioner has 3 minutes to deliver their answer for what they would do for any given magical scenario. We are assuming that all mundane actions have been taken to rectify the situation, so we're really only focusing on the magical and the spiritual in this conversation. So everyone has 3 minutes to deliver their spellwork advice. When they have 1 minute left, I will hold up some feathers, and when they have fully ran out of time, I will hold up a crystal wand. But I wanted to show you really quick. If you go to the homepage of my YouTube channel and scroll down, you will see a playlist called Spellwork Panels, and here you will be able to see all the episodes. We've got episode 1 through 3. Today is of course episode 4, but we've talked about so many different things. So episode 1 was really home protection, spirit work. We talked about baneful magic and domination work. Episode 2, we talked about psychic abilities, plant spirits, luck spells, and a bunch of other stuff. Episode 3 was all about dealing with haunted houses, spells for breakups. We even got into liars and truth spells and a lot of other juicy stuff. And I am very excited for episode 4 topics today. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. Again, this is the last episode of the year, so I hope you enjoy. I want to get your personal opinions on this, so please let me know in the comments below how you feel about this. But what I really tried to do with this episode is I wanted us to have more of a discussion about each topic afterwards. If you notice in episodes 1 through 3, we really focused on delivering our answers as quick as possible and then moving on to the next topic to make sure the conversation wasn't too drug out. But with that, we weren't able to really have discussions with each other to challenge each other's beliefs and really get into the nitty-gritty of why we would do certain things. So in this episode, we did challenge each other a bit. We did have discussions, and I just loved being able to talk about different viewpoints and still be respectable. So let me know in the comments how you feel about the discussion portion after each prompt. Yes, we do still deliver our answers in a timely fashion, but afterwards we have more of a free-flowing conversation about it all and just kind of see where the conversation takes us. So let me know your thoughts, and I hope you enjoy. Hello everyone, I am ivycorvus. To kick off these introductions, I am a chaos magician as well as a psychic and a witch. I've been practicing various occult philosophies for off and on 20 years. That gives me quite a diverse background that I won't bore you with. So to start these introductions, Kellyanne, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This always feels like the bit where I have to sell myself a little bit, so sorry if I sound really obnoxious, but I've been doing this for a long time, spiritual counseling and tarot reading. I'm qualified in one, award-winning in the other, but I'm also a witchcraft author. I have 2 witchcraft books, Rebel Witch and Witch in Darkness, and I also mentor witches and mystics. And I suppose you could say that I kind of combine a lot of occult ideas with the mission of emotional healing, spiritual sovereignty and freewheeling chaos magic and mysticism and all that good stuff.
Hi, I'm Imogen from Sapling Tarot. I make tarot YouTube videos, but I'm also a professional tarot reader here on the west coast of Scotland. I've grown up around Britain and Ireland, so that is kind of what shapes my attitude towards magic, which is that it's very like normal. It's very like day-to-day kind of stuff. So I'm maybe going to struggle a little bit with the difference between the mundane and the magical, because it's all kind of one thing for me. My like particular area of like study, research or whatever is making magic more accessible, but like particularly for disabled, neurodivergent and people and trauma survivors.
Hello everybody, my name is Joanna. I'm known everywhere on socials as the Polish folk witch. I come from Poland, as you can guess. My background is mostly in traditional witchcraft and Polish folk magic, with some elements of syncretic European witchcraft traditions. And yeah, that's it.
Hi guys, I'm Aurora. My channel is Lavender Hazelwood Witches. I am primarily an eclectic witch. probably leaning towards hedge and green. I have a soft spot in my heart for animals, so you'll see a lot of sort of animal related rescue stuff on my site too, or my channel.
Hi everybody. My name is AB. The name of my channel is AB Witch Journal. I keep re-emphasizing I don't have much title or definition of myself more than I'm a witch. I'm jumping from theory to theory. But what I do pretty much is showcase my experience as a beginner practitioner and talk about the books that I like. I've been taking a small break, but here we are.
Hello everyone, you might know me as Ysha, the activist witch. On YouTube mainly I do content where I try to bring my background as an intersectionality educator along with witchcraft and show that witchcraft is rebellion and we should always be reminded of that. My main practice is around tarot and planetary magic. I never think about it, but recently I had to realize that's mainly what I do. My background also comes from Italian folk magic because I was raised in a very small village in Italy and I didn't realize that most of our superstitions were folk magic. So there's that as well.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be back here again. I am Aradia Arcanum, a creator here on YouTube, a magical practitioner in the occult, pretty eclectic, leaning on more of the left-hand path side of things. And also I run a coven and a spiritual mentor.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sanhre. I am a chaos magician and I'm a teacher of magic first, for sure, and a YouTuber second. I'm not great at this. I run 2 programs, the Occult University and Tarot Academy, and I'm really happy to be back.
Hey folks, I'm Astra. I'm a Solomonic ceremonial magician with a specialization in the grimoire tradition. So that's really what you'll hear me talking about today.
Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited. This is going to be such a good episode. So I have a D20 here. I explained this offline for everybody, but for others watching, a D20, if you know, you know, from Dungeons and Dragons. Anyways, we only have 15 prompts here, and we're not going to be able to get through all 15 prompts today. So I'm going to use this dice to determine which prompt it is that we answer, and I may have to roll this a couple times because we don't have 20 prompts. So let's see what our first prompt is. Of course, that's not on our list. Okay, here we go. So we're going to go with prompt number 2. You feel as though you have been jinxed, hexed, or cursed, or maybe you've caught the evil eye. Whatever the situation is, you have been experiencing a slew of bad luck and can feel the unnatural negativity around you, which is drastically different from how your life normally is. What do you do? In part 1, we talked about baneful work when casting it on someone else, but we have yet to talk about what happens when you think that you might be cursed.
Oh, because this is basically what I felt happened when I started my practice. There are a couple of things. First, diagnostics. So understanding what happened. Is it in my head? Is it just a bad turn of luck? It's all this stuff. At the time, what happened to me was intense from all sides of my life. Yet, every tarot reading that I didn't tell me that it was coming from the outside. And it was kind of weird to understand. Going back and looking at the situation from a bit further away, I realized, I don't know if you know about birth cards in tarot, but I was in a tower year. So when you hear like on Archetypal Tarot from Mary Kay Greer about tower year might actually mean that you face complete destroyment of relationship as you know them, you might face homelessness, and I faced all those things. So it was interesting to realize it was coming from there. Before getting there though, I did what every beginner is told to do, which is before you do anything, learn protection magic. Like it's, you know, if you're getting there, it might be useful. So yeah, I learned about cleansing properly the house head to toe. So a lot of fumigation, a lot of understanding. Do I do this with white sage, or is that appropriate? Even maybe it's worth to do it with rosemary or whatever kind of herb I have around. That's also a thing. I learned warding, or better, Astra taught me warding, and that's still a method that works like a charm to this day. It's with Angelica root powder and Psalm. Maybe I'll, if she goes into that, she'll go into detail, but yeah, amazing. And that helps keeping away. And the banishment and the cleaning part, I was just lucky and I did the cleaning. But banishment can include going harder on any fumigation, do actual rituals. Lock your mirrors. You know what? Costs nothing. It's as easy as to go with a pentagram on it, and it's there. It helps. So that's my experience and how I handled it at the time. It was a hard year, but then it passes.
The question is, you feel as though you have been jinxed or hexed. The first step that I take is to check if I actually have or have not been. Is this situation a caused by myself crossing myself? Am I crossing a spirit or an entity of any sorts, or is this by someone else? And according to which result the reading gives me, I take a different approach. Now, I'm not going to go into specifics because I feel that it might be a lot of information, but I do rely on a herbal bath that is very common in my country. Rue is a big plant utilized to get rid of negative spirits, jinxes, pretty much any type of parasite as well, a spiritual parasite, let's say like that. So I like to make a bath of rue with rue agrimony, and hyssop. I also like to add salt, and I like to take that bath for 9 days in a row. Because I grew up Christian and Catholic, I prayed the Psalm 23 and the Psalm 91. So that is my go-to in this type of instances. Now, if I were being hexed, I will be adding to that bath vinegar, and I will be taking that bath from 9 days to 12 days. And in addition to that, I will add a prayer to, because I'm like that, return the hex to whom I have thrown it, in addition to other elements. But this is the overall what I will do.
So in Polish folk magic, we are really big on a few things, but a lot of them utilize plants for purposes like this. So I don't want to repeat myself with what was already said about divination, because for me, that's always the first step as well. But assuming that I'm actually hexed or some evil eye is going on, what we do first, we utilize a plant known as cabbage thistle in English, but in Polish, we call it czarcie żebro, which is actually the devil's rib. And we use this herb to create like this very potent bath in which you are supposed to wash your entire body, and it strips all of the negative influences off of you. But then what you want to do next is you want to ensure that nothing else clings, or you are protected from further magical attacks or evil eye. And for that, I would usually use, first of all, carrying the rosary on you at all times. And second of all, utilizing mugwort as well. Just wearing it on the body is enough to protect. So that's how I would go about it.
Okay, so I think people would be surprised at how easy it is to undo Malefica, which is why I kind of think it's just silly to do in the first place. But regardless, people already talked about diagnosis, which is certainly the first part. But once you know what's going on, it's pretty easy to neutralize. If it was spirit-led, identifying the spirit and then calling upon its superior to constrain it and break the pact most certainly works. Another thing you can do, specifically relating to the evil eye, is there is a gemstone from the Cambridge collection of magical gems. I think that's what it's called, but it essentially it has a gemstone specifically related to this, where it has the evil eye on it, and then it's surrounded by various animals like the crab, the scorpion, there's a dog, there's some other things that I'm forgetting on there. And the whole point of this gemstone is to protect you from the evil eye. So something that I've done to break the evil eye is taken the moon card in tarot. If you think about the moon card, the moon is in the night sky, the shining eye, right? And so there is that correlation between the evil eye and the moon. And so I've taken the moon card, drawn like an eye over the moon itself, who actually has an eye. And then if you think about the moon in geomantic terms, it's actually, or sorry, not the moon, an eye in geomantic terms, if you turn it like at a 90-degree angle, you actually get the figure of Carcer. And Carcer is a very Saturnian a figure often hitting like limitation, right? And that is what an evil eye does. It inhibits you from really being able to like live your life and do what you need to do. And so I will draw the eye in kind of the figure of Carcer, and then I actually will do the opposite of that. So if you were to invert the figure, where 1 point becomes 2, 2 becomes 1, you're going to get the figure of Conjunctio. And Conjunctio is often, it's a very mercurial figure, very much a crossroads kind of figure. And so this idea of going to the crossroads and having those spirits uncross your condition, right, is very much a part of that. But then you can, work some other stuff in there. Often stabbing the eye, right, is a very common method of like breaking the evil eye on you. So doing that kind of work with like the moon card is a really easy way for me to break those kind of things. For more severe things, honestly, like to be really frank, my go-to curse breaking is really just taking the Eucharist at Mass, because there's really no better breaking of Malefica than like the body and blood of Christ, at least in like Catholic theology. Even when you think of like the story of Saint Cyprian and Saint Justina, right? She repelled those demonic attacks by just using the sign of the cross. And so that is really powerful for me. And then a couple other people have mentioned baths, right? So taking a ritual bath, for me, that's a Solomonic bath. But yeah, very much the same things apply.
My students and I all together every morning for balancing and just fortifying your aura. And I think that fortifying your aura is the most important thing you could do. It makes you nearly almost unfuckwithable by human hexes. And the what I'll say about that is that I've made numerous videos about E.A. Quetting, who is supposedly the most dangerous black magician alive. He's just a meth head. But he's sent attacks at me a number of times and they don't work. But cursing yourself or breaking a pact you've made with one of your deities, if you do that, then you've got other issues to deal with. And I would say, apologizing to the deity for one thing, trying to make amends. Clearly I'm speaking from experience. And just trying to get your mindset back on track. Like if you've crossed yourself through your own negativity, like you've got to sort that out, and you can do it magically. But you really have to put the effort into it in terms of changing your thought patterns. That's where I would put most of my focus, because if you really keep your aura strong, then the evil eye isn't really going to get to you.
So Scottish folk magic has like a lot of stuff with the evil eye. I think it's like a pretty, I can never say the word, syncretic thing, like across like so many cultures. But like we have ways of sailing like through all the different elements. But in terms of like what I would do, I like just burn it. And we'll get to it if we get to the like astrological what magic do you like lean towards, but like I just burn a lot of shit. And but Juniper and Rowan is like the main things that you would do like in Scottish folk magic, and like what I would do because I have them in my head. And so I would burn those. Mostly I'd have like a birch a body scrub thing. So I know that ritual baths are a really big thing in a lot of practices. I hate them. I hate baths. I'm a shower person, and so I've got like a birch kind of scrubby thing for like getting rid of everything ever. And then also like from personal experience of really feeling like something was kind of out to get me as a child, I did like charm and amulets to wear and just put all of my faith and all of my desire for things to just stop going wrong into, I think it was like a slice of amethyst or something, and I wore it every day, and that did the trick eventually.
First thing I do is go to the ocean and take a dip. That's really super cleansing just on my person, so that I don't feel the heaviness, the ick that comes along with it. Then there's a return to sender spell that is really easy to do, actually. And you just take a mirror on a waning moon, and then you take hydrangea flowers, because that breaks negativity and curses. Surround your mirror with it, say a little incantation. I mean, if you were going to be aggressive about it, you'd send it, whatever was sent to you, straight back to the person, which would be essentially like, I'm rubber, you're glue, everything bounces off of me and sticks to you. You know that little rhyme. But if you wanted to sort of kill it and just have it be neutral, then you wouldn't, you would send neutrality back instead. So those are the things that I use to clean myself.
Oh yeah, so I wanted to say I thought a lot of things that have already been said about diagnostics and is it in your head, etc. And I do all that for sure. I really resonate with what Sanhre said about fortifying your aura, and I think Ysha said something pretty similar, like just practice protection magic, and then these kinds of conversations that you have to have with yourself happen less because you don't require that. I think of my aura as being very unfuckwithable. So when something comes in and is messing with stuff, I actually also kind of feel that there might be some kind of lesson for me in there, or something that I'm supposed to be understanding. So yes, I have dealt with, and I do think most ideas of psychic attack they're psychological, they're from the person. Psychic attack is not that common for most people, but in my line of work, it might be much more common. I have experienced things like that from time to time. I have called in, the cavalry. I have called in other beings and that kind of stuff. I have requested the help of other practitioners. I have done hardcore cord cuttings because I assume most psychic attack is happening because in some way or another, I'm energetically allowing it to in a way that I didn't mean. But really, because I keep my aura so fortified, if something comes in and starts messing with me, I also have this very strong feeling that I'm supposed to pay attention to that because it's actually in some way, on some level, enriching for me to know that there is some kind of hole somewhere. There is somewhere in the energetic field where I'm just letting things in that I don't want, that I would never mean to want. And so it's a chance for me to clean up house, and it's a chance for me to I'm impressed. I'm almost a bit like, whoa, you got through my force field many years in the making. That there's something for me there. You're like a guru in disguise. So I do, I guess, value the havoc that unleashes as well. I kind of wanted to say that.
I am raising the hand because definitely with what's been said, I definitely agree with Sanhre in regards to the aura, fortifying the aura. Actually, quite recently, I had the opportunity to take as I mentioned before, I took a class with Sarah Masters, and Sarah goes over protection, and she actually has a particular take that I enjoy. In regards to protection, she definitely sees the spiritual ecosystem as a better way to protect your space than mostly focusing on warding. Does not say do not put wards, more like make sure that the spiritual ecosystem within your space is strong. Your ecosystem, your protection, like your own defenses are strong. Make sure that the spirits within your house are strong. Make sure that the deities that you work with are well fed. Make sure that your ancestors are taken care of. And when you have that strong ecosystem in your space, it's harder for jinxes and other spirits to go through. And if it's something goes through, you take care of it, prophylaxis, but also with what was mentioned by Kelly, and why did that go through? What's the reason of why this was allowed? So yes, just adding a little bit extra on to say I fully agree with these last two statements.
So as per usual, I'm going to wait until everybody has a chance to talk before I raise my hand and kind of talk about my answers. But coming from, the chaos magic paradigm, I don't really prescribe to the spirit model in the sense that I believe that spirits are objectively true, whether I believe in them or not. For me, belief is really what powers everything. And so if I'm thinking I'm jinxed, hexed, or cursed or something along those lines, I want to immediately stop feeding it with my belief. And I know that's easier said than done. I know a lot of people are like, I can't just stop believing that I'm cursed or hexed or whatever. But if you can get yourself there and realize that you do actually have the power to stop feeding this. I had a situation where I was cursed once, and I know that because there was this woman who had told me that she cursed me. It was this whole dramatic thing. I'm not going to get into how that happened in the first place, but she had cursed me and I believed her and I fed into it, and something awful, truly awful happened right afterwards. And I was like, that's it, that's the curse. It must be her. And then the moment I was able to shift my mindset and really say, wait a minute, I'm not going to feed this anymore. And I'm just going to cut this right here. I don't believe in this. I don't believe that she can have that sort of power over my own will. Things changed and it died. So I don't think that, I think baths are really great, like ritual baths and, you know, certain different practices I think are really, really helpful. But also I think that literally just shifting your belief can let it die. So that is my own chaotic perspective. I know that some people who prescribe to the spirit model are going to disagree with me there. So I would actually kind of like to open this up and discuss that. Do you think that hexes and curses can exist even if you aren't feeding your belief into them?
Oh man. Okay, so yes, I believe that they can exist even if you don't believe in them, if you don't have a specific belief against them. Okay, so in the Satanic Bible, which, you know, like, you can get mad at me, everybody, all you want, is one of the best books of magic ever written. Anton LaVey talks about this. You know, people who don't believe in hexes are the easiest people to hex because they don't believe in hexes. Now, it's not like they don't believe, but they don't have a specific belief against it. And to what you were saying about the power of belief, I love having this conversation with people because they'll say, like, lots of people I know, like, look, I can't just change my beliefs. And I'm like, that's a belief. You believe that you can't just change your beliefs. And changing your beliefs takes practice and effort, just like lifting weights takes practice and effort, but you get good at it and you get strong at it, and then you can do it quite easily. But people don't try because they don't believe they can do it.
So I think it's a matter of having the right balance, right? Because I do believe in if your will is strong, it's very difficult for things, you know, those psychic attacks. And for me, personally, I just had this happen the other night. So I have all of these wards and things, you know, around my home, because, you know, when you're in this type of, I don't want to say business, but in this world, you know, that's 101. But for me, periodically, what happens is when I find that my will isn't at its strongest, I'm usually notified in the astral realm. They come in the form of bottom feeders. So just the other day, it was a couple of nights ago, I had this happen. So I woke up and was like, what the fuck now? So I immediately thought of what am I doing at this moment? What is it that I am not, why is my strength, you know, waning right now? So I think it's just a balance, having a healthy balance of not feeding too much into, oh my God, let me protect myself because I could possibly be hexed. And then also making sure, you know, your will is strong. And that is, you know, through having your aura, like everyone was talking about, you know, and all of those things, but a healthy balance.
So this is a challenge for me. I do subscribe to the idea that spirits do exist. I do not necessarily subscribe to the idea that they are as humans make them to be, because they are not human. So the challenge with the spirit's existence, I think, that is by the fact that we can get to know so much to them based on our own reality, existence, and materialism. Anthropomorphization is a challenge with the spirits, deities, and all of that. That's my perspective. Yet I also believe that's why I also make the difference when we were talking with the question, did I cross myself? And crossing yourself can be, in my experience, energetically. You can hex yourself with words, but you can also have that pattern of thought that definitely brings you down and put you in a spot that you cannot come out to. I will use a silly example with my own lost weight journey. The repeated pattern of I will never lose weight. I will never get healthier, because on my end, it was based on my health. Like I had still working on like fatty liver and all of that. The negativity and the aspect of I will never come out of here kept me there. And it was when I caught with that pattern of thought and I started getting therapy that I was able to get out of there. Will I say that this is a generational curse or an outside hex? I doubt it. But I've also experienced in my culture how people that do not necessarily subscribe to a religion, faith, or practice say, I argued with this witch and this situation happened. So there is a weight with culture and tradition, at least in Venezuela. There is a weight on the psychological aspect, and also there is a weight on the experience aspect. It's hard to respond this question, but I guess that this is my response. At the end of the day, you have to see what is being the cause of the hex. But I think that hex definitely, and jinxes and spirits, it can exist and it can affect you without you having to believe in them. That's my response. Sorry.
I would like to add to this from a perspective of somebody who's actually a former chaot. I used to be a chaos magician in the past years ago, before I, let's say, use the, kind of fucked up word converted, because that's not how it works. I changed paradigms. Now I practice within the spirit model, right? So I know where you are coming from, where you are speaking of these matters from the more psychological paradigm that has to do with chaos magic. And I think to maybe explain it for somebody who doesn't practice the spirit model, I think that if you believe in the actual existence of spirits, that they are real, that they don't come from your psyche, or that they are not just archetypes, etc., when you are an animist who believes that the world is inhabited by persons, not all of whom are humans, then I think you just are open to a broader spectrum of what's out there when it comes to the forces that can have an impact on you. Basically, that's the price you have to pay for believing in those things, I would like to say. So if you are, let's say, practicing within the psychological paradigm, you are kind of protecting yourself from a lot of that shit just by not believing in it. And you will not encounter it in your practice because you don't approach it. And that's what protects you. But if somebody practices within the spirit paradigm, spirit model, and believes in spirits and interacts with them and willingly ventures into spaces, be it in nature or be it in spirit flight or trance work, and you willingly put yourself out there for those energies, then you have to pay the price of what's out there as a result of that. And that's where you are more susceptible to being influenced by those forces, right? So I guess that's my best way to explain and kind of try to compromise between the two models. I don't know if that makes sense. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so I feel like I should probably clarify. The way I practice chaos magic is so different than any other chaot I've met, and I want to try to elaborate on that. There's no single chaos magic book that explains what I personally believe. It's just the closest I can possibly get. And so without going on a whole philosophical tangent, I do believe spirits can exist, and I also believe that spirits cannot exist. I believe in multiple different dimensions that overlap each other, and your belief is what changes the filters in your mind to be able to shift dimensions and experience a different reality. So we have all these overlapping timelines and dimensions, and some people may be operating in the dimension where spirits do objectively exist regardless of belief, and then some people don't, and they have absolutely no somebody put in chat, Aurora put Schrodinger's cat, yeah, in chat. It's basically similar to that. And I work with spirits all the time because I'm currently operating from the meta model where I am adopting this belief in spirits for this moment in time, and I do work with spirits quite a bit. So I don't want to totally dismiss the fact that spirits exist. I know we're kind of tangenting from the whole curse thing now, but I felt like I just wanted to clarify or clear that up. But I think that there's an opportunity for them to exist and to not exist. And if you were to use your belief and to change the filters in your brain, you can shift shift yourself to a different dimension where that hex, curse, or jinx is not affecting you and this spirit is not coming after you. So I hope that makes sense. Let's see. Oh, and I wanted to go back to one other thing that Aradia brought up. I do think strength of will really, really matters. I think that's so important. And that's why we learn protection magic. That's why we work on cleansing our aura or cleansing our space. And we do all of these things. We do ritual baths and say these prayers and incantations. We are strengthening our will. We're cleansing our space. We're making ourselves feel psychologically good and healthy. And I think that matters because when you have a weakened will or a weakened psychological state, I do think that you're way more susceptible to stuff like that, to feeling like you're jinxed, hexed, cursed, etc. So yeah, I guess that's my piece. Everything exists and also does not exist. So it's very chaotic. Ysha, go ahead.
So this brought me back to explain something in a slightly larger way. In Italy, whether you think you practice witchcraft or not, I am confident in saying that 98% of the population does believe in the evil eye, does believe that bad things happen to them and somebody cursed them, or in Italy, the malocchio is just literally somebody's being jealous of you. A very dear friend of mine who is an Italian witch and lives here in the UK as well, I was visiting him a few months ago and I was just telling him, oh my God, I have such hair envy. And he literally was like, don't say that, because that's how it works for us. And he's like in tradition, like his family from both sides, they have the gift supposedly that you pass to read and dispel. And esoteric as it sounds, I think in Italy, it's a sociocultural issue. So if you go back, everybody believes that because Italy has a mentality of scarcity that comes from the fact that we weren't a country 160 years ago. It was all little city-states. So the mindset that everybody comes from millennia is, I have this, whatever I have is mine, and is if anybody has anything good, it's because they're taking it from me. And I don't doubt that then they believe it, and then bad things happen, and they make the connection easier to somebody thought bad of me, somebody was envious, I have the evil eye. But there's also a very strong sociocultural way that it reinforces this. And I can definitely tell you that, again, nobody in Italy thinks that they are practicing witchcraft. Actually, it's very bad because, we have the Vatican, we're very Catholics and everything. But the mindset comes from sociocultural issues that when you look back, it makes sense. But because we're not educated about these things, then they're harder to dispel. So just on the concept of where do the beliefs come from in the case of Italy, and as some kind of originators, or at least very strong perpetrators of the idea of the evil eye, it comes from that for us.
I'm with you. I think of the spirit realm as being objectively true, but I don't see it as being incompatible with chaos magic. I also think that chaos magic as a culture has turned into something different than what it was certainly back in the 70s, where it's way more about a scientifically rooted kind of way of looking at magic than it is about belief, even though belief still plays an important role, clearly. But what I want to say is that animism is compatible with panpsychism. The spirit realm is compatible with string theory, and the way that magic works is compatible with many worlds. And I love talking about it from that perspective. So yeah, I'm with you, but I also still consider myself a chaos magician.
So I am not with you, but I don't think that's surprising. I do think that spirits objectively exist, and that curses, jinxes, and hexes, particularly in spirit form, will happen regardless of whether or not you believe in it. But I will say that one of the critical components to whether a curse, jinx, hex, whatever is thrown your way, whether it has any effect, is whether or not you have the pathways open in which it is acting. So really critical in kind of my framework is this idea that, like, I have pacts and agreements with a lot of spirits, and many of them are set over particular aspects in my life. And so they act as a kind of like bar bouncer, if you will, in a sense that like anything that goes down that path can't get to its location because there is a spirit standing in its way that like will fuck up the other spirit. And in that sense, like it doesn't matter then, because I like to kind of laugh and be like, it's my secret service of spirits, right? Who do the job of like protecting me against these kind of things. So yes, they exist, but the question of whether it affects you, I think, is more of a consideration of like, do you have the path open? Kind of like Kellyanne was saying when we answered the initial question. do you have an opening where you have maybe had an oversight and like that's how they're getting in? And if not, then it frankly doesn't matter. And this is why like most of the stuff doesn't really kind of scare me or make me concerned, because I'm like, I've got like it's covered. I'm not really worried about it.
So like I couldn't confidently tell you whether I'm like more on the psychological side or more on the spiritual side, because it flip-flops all the time. But I do think that regardless of whether you believe in hexes and jinxes and whether that has actually happened, I think taking some kind of action helps. So if you, whether it's just you've had like a run of bad luck and you're feeling really down, or you've been hexed or you've hexed yourself, lighting a little, you know, stick of juniper or whatever and waving it around and being like, better now, then I think it helps. It's that sense of, because if you have had like a run of bad luck, you can feel so like impotent and so like that you have no control over things. And so just having that little kind of almost like placebo type thing of, well, I did a thing, I had my bath, I had my like my shower scrub or whatever, I did that, I've somehow taken control of this. So it's like whether you believe that what you're doing has like a magical spiritual impact or not, I think it can still help anyway.
I just wanted to say I completely agree with Imogen on that. And what I was thinking of was the fact that I believe in the way things affect people. For me, I think that's way more important than the discussion about whether or not something really exists, which I'm very intrigued by people talking about it, but I lost my interest in trying to figure it out a long time ago, because I'm just not going to be able to figure it out. Sometimes I believe in it, sometimes I don't. Depends if it's useful, depends if it serves me, depends if it's the day where I would be, depends if I can see the context of why I would be believing something in the moment that I don't ordinarily believe, and whether or not I need to shift that belief because it's not useful. But I do believe in the way things affect people, and I do believe that spiritual activity can have a very empowering impact on somebody, whereby they immediately after that working do not any longer feel that they're being attacked. They feel like everything is on lock. So what has happened there metaphysically, I'm not really so bothered about. I'm more interested in the fact that they are like, cool, I'm going to go about my day. That hex or whatever was happening, that psychic attack no longer affects me, I'm golden. And that's sort of more what I'm interested in. And that sort of stems from the notion that I've realized over time, which is that people's attitudes affect everything. For example, I love that you mentioned in the prompt about a run of bad luck, because I've been talking to people lately about that exactly astrological. It's the placebo effect. I think a placebo is magic. I think it just proves that the mind is like just mind-blowing. But yeah, I've noticed lately that I've been talking about bad luck. And if you looked at objectively my life over the last, well, my life when I was younger, but then my life over the last couple of years, 4 years, I'm a strong candidate for someone to say, I'm not lucky, I have bad luck. What the hell is going on? It's like one thing after another, big things, right? Bereavements and all kinds of things. But I don't think I have bad luck. My attitude is, and it's not to say I'm better than anyone else that feels they have bad luck. I've definitely felt in the past like I'm the universe's unwanted child. I have a black cloud following me. Something is wrong. Something is cosmically not okay, whereby I'm being singled out and attacked energetically. But at this point in my life, I do not feel that way. And attitude is everything. Somebody else I've met with, on paper, I guess you could say maybe lesser issues than I've had to deal with over the last few years, feels they have very bad luck and something is wrong, something needs to be dealt with. And I'm more interested in how I can help them deal with that, because that's their attitude. And if that's their attitude, that's their truth. And if that's their truth, they can find something that unlocks them from that. If tomorrow I wake up and decide I am being attacked, then I only care about what works to assure me I'm not being attacked. I do not care what is doing it or how to find out, because I just don't believe my life is ever long enough to answer that quiz. It's just too difficult.
I agree with you, Kellyanne. That's exactly how I feel. It's at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether things are objectively real or not. What matters is what works. And so for me, I don't care if a ritual bath is just a psychological way of making me feel better, or if it's actually getting rid of the bad energy. It doesn't matter, because if it works, it works. But one of the things I wanted to bring up too, in regards to belief and penetrating that will, is I think fear really changes the brain filters and the reality that you experience. So So you may think that you don't believe in ghosts, that you don't believe in hexes or curses, but if you're fearful of them, a little part of you does. There's a little part of you subconsciously that does feed into it, of course. So I think that fear also feeds into our beliefs, whether something exists or not, even if you think you don't. And then I also want to add that I personally feel like I have a very strong and stubborn will, stubborn as fuck. And coming from my perspective of actively trying to let spirits fuck me up. And I know this is irresponsible, and I don't recommend this to anybody else, but I have actively tried to go to the most haunted places I can get my hands on. I have tried to summon the creepiest shit. I have tried to do, and maybe my summoning skills at the time were just not very good, and that's probably why they never showed up. But going to these haunted places where even, you know, mundane people who don't dabble in the occult are still experiencing these horrific things. I was coming out, okay, here we go. I'm here. I'm a vessel. Let's do this. Let's see what happens. And because I have zero fear, I don't believe it can affect me, and therefore it didn't. And I did not experience any sort of negative, never had a negative possession. After all the sketchy shit I've done, I should have caught something by now. You know, that's where my perspective is coming from all this. So there's my piece on that. AB, what are you saying? Pazuzu? Where are you? What is Pazuzu? What does that mean?
Okay, so Pazuzu is a deity from Babylonian mythology, but it became popular due to the Exorcist movie, which, by the way, is a terrible work on marketing on that Babylonian spirit, which is very nice, cool, and powerful. And the Exorcist film make it look as if it were pretty much a demon, because that's also my argument with a lot of Christianity, that anything that is not God is the devil. And I mean, yes, but no. So that's why I say, Pazuzu, where are you, my friend? I'm here. I do want to add in regards to this, and I will be brief because I know that I made myself an omelette try to explain my mind. I think that jumping between languages is hard. It's not an excuse. I do want to reemphasize that for me, because my culture does come from a space where they believe in everything, and it's a younger culture. We are highly influenced by our native tradition. Well, yes, yes, Sanhre. My culture is highly influenced by our native traditions, also by the traditions of Europe and Africa. My culture is highly animistic even without they believing so. And for me, it's because I grew up in this environment, it's hard for me, even when I went through a process of being atheist and not believing in this and finding myself in a place of wonder when witchcraft finally found me. It's hard for me not to believe that the spirits or magic is a thing. But I do love what Kellyanne mentioned in regards to the attitude. And I'm going to add a little extra, which I know that I always do, take in consideration cultural spaces and time. We still talk in a very privileged way from hexes and challenges, because for us, our hexes and challenges are sickness, death, loss of job, whether there are people in cultures in this world right now. I'm not talking about 100 years ago. I'm talking about right now that are dealing with death, hardship, war, pain, and suffering in ways that we cannot understand. And if that doesn't bring food to thought, I don't know what could. And I will leave it there because I am already rambling again.
Yeah, I wanted to reply to that, AB. I think that's a really, really good point. And that is actually part of the reason that I don't consider myself to have bad luck. Because of that awareness that when bad things have befallen me, all of the resources I have and the gratitude I have for the things that I've not experienced, that I could never understand, and how even just considering myself to have this like bad luck, even at the worst points where I was super mentally ill and all that stuff and very like volatilely housed, I think to myself, yeah, but comparatively or whatever, bad luck, isn't that just kind of a way of seeing things? And also, I love that you brought that up, because the whole concept of like you know, having to deal with a hex or a curse, or to put a hex or a curse on someone or something, that kind of like dialogue, I think it really needs to be placed. For me, I place it in the context of who are the most marginalized people witching, and what do they need to do from the margins, because hexing and cursing, or dealing with attacks, dealing with material or psychic attacks, often comes from this place of having no recourse through courts of justice, no recourse through organizations, no recourse through media, who don't put on stories of people being treated heinously because they don't look, you know, like the type that the media want to elevate, like their stories are not considered. So a lot of these things that people do from the margins to deflect psychic or material attack, I would never argue with them that, like, well, that's an attitude, because it's like, sure, it's an attitude coming from a place that you can't ever understand or know. When there is no other recourse, that's when that kind of magic comes through. So even when people have asked me, what do you do to deflect things, I always say, don't ask me from a moral standpoint what should be done, because really, when the shit goes down, you better be ready. And there's shit that goes down that I have never ever experienced, and what people do in that position is what people do in a corner out of resistance. And that is a very good point, that, like, yeah, first of all, attitude is based on really having to look at what your privileges are, and saying someone comes from an attitude of having to deflect attack, maybe that's not functional, maybe they should change that, sure, but what place am I saying that from, and how easy is it for me to say that, you know? So that's a very good point. I love that you brought that up.
Before we move on to the next topic, I kind of wanted to just say one more thing that I don't think I brought up at any point. Just to clarify for everybody listening, I do believe that hexes and curses can work. Okay, I do believe they can, but if the person being hexed or cursed chooses to then not feed it and not feed their belief into it, then it's going to cease having any sort of effect on them. So I just want to put that out there. I do believe they can work. Anybody can send shitty energy. It's a whole complicated philosophical conversation. All right, prompt number 2 is going to be prompt number 9, and I know there's at least one person that did not want this prompt to come up, so I'm very sorry to that person. How do you use spell work to facilitate shadow work and integrate hidden aspects of yourself? Or do you? Is shadow work even necessary for effective spell work? So let's talk about like the controversies of shadow work.
Let's begin by saying that I'm not a professional in shadow work. I'm not a professional in psychology, not graduated in any of those aspects. And even with the bare knowledge that I have in regards it, I am aware that in social media, it sells shadow work as something that is simply not what actually is. So I just want to phrase that in that way. A lot of people talk about shadow work as a trend without necessarily understanding the elements that were brought up by Jung when the shadow model was mentioned within psychology. So I will just drop that on the table. Now, parting from that and understanding that I'm not a psychologist and I don't necessarily work with the Jung model because I'm not too fully familiar with it, I will say what I do in regards magic, my own self, and I always mention therapy. I will keep bringing it up. I do think that there are aspects of ourselves that needs to be explored and healed for dive on certain areas of magic. And I say this from my own experience. When I started practicing witchcraft, actually practicing, I was a very hurt individual, very traumatized. I still am working on those elements. I grew up in an environment that did not allow me to be my true self as a pansexual individual, as a person that even right now, even though I'm man presenting, I'm still wondering and exploring certain aspects of my own gender. And the mere fact of me growing in that constriction caused certain traumas, plus other elements, plus the mere fact of where I come from Venezuela. So I'm giving this background to reiterate that when I came to magic, I wanted to hurt people. I wanted to hurt myself. I didn't know where I was or who I was in life. And healing and exploring certain areas of myself have given me the opportunity to not wanting to lash out. I'm not saying that you should not want to defend yourself. I'm not saying that you should not hex those that hurt you. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there are certain areas that need to be worked on yourself before diving on certain other areas within witchcraft. Because I do not think that witchcraft is a space where you are going to find a safe area. If you do something wrong, you can fuck yourself up. And I am a firm believer of that. And when it comes to talk about the shadow aspect, in addition to therapy, something that I do is asking questions within tarot, like, what is this area of me that I need to work on that is hurting right now? And that simple meditation, I pull 3 cards and I literally envision myself flying within the card and asking to the card. And so I learned this method by a friend. I fly within the the tarot card, and for example, I pull the devil, and I will fly myself within the tarot, and I will talk with the devil within that tarot card and ask them, okay, devil, tell me, what do I need to know from you? And yes, and that's pretty much it. The devil will explain what I need to learn based on that reading. Long answer, and I apologize, but I think that is important to reemphasize.
Yeah, I wanted to say, first of all, the whole notion with shadow work of it kind of allowing you to understand how to be a healthier practitioner. I completely agree. I would never say anybody needs shadow work. I think shadow work is a lot like psychedelics. I'm not going to push it. If you feel that you want to go towards it and it makes sense for you, fine. But I would never say people need it to be a good practitioner, a healthy practitioner. It will, however, if you are into it, probably help you be a more ethical practitioner who's figured out what you want to actually use your magic for. So there is that. And for me, I do not combine spell work with shadow work, but I do bring the findings from my shadow work, which does involve some witchy elements like tarot readings, etc. I do bring those findings to my spellcraft and my ritual. In other words, what have I discovered in shadow work that I feel very clearly is the case for me that can then be brought to spell work or ritual to use as a means of creating material change, right? Real change. What practicals do I need to bring my magical energy to witness the integration of that shadow so it's not bothering me anymore and it's not writing the script and it's not fucking with the narrative? So to me, shadow work and spellcraft don't meet, but the findings of shadow work kind of inform and inspire what I might do for myself in spellcraft.
All right, so I'm going to give 2 answers to this from 2 different perspectives, and I'm going to shout out 2 of my students because I just went through this with one of my students who was also a student of Kristen Ramazana and then gone on to do her own thing, which is incredible. And she has a practice where through guided hypnosis, you go through this entire visualization process of bringing in your guides and dealing with your shadow in that way. And that was incredibly powerful, and it really helped me. And we're using the spirit model to do this, but you're uncovering things about your psyche, right? And it was wonderful. So I want to shout out Jamie Ryder for that. And then from a more mundane way of looking at it, my friend Ashley has a shadow work journal that she just wrote that's incredible. That's just journaling prompts for introspection and dealing with yourself, looking at the aspects of yourself that are, you know, maybe not so comfortable, which I think is really what shadow work is. But like that word shadow work is like, if you're not seeing a Jungian psychiatrist, like you're doing shadow work, right? But maybe we should come up with a different name for it. I don't know, whatever it is, what it is. But I do think it's important. And I think that the beginning of shadow work, the one thing that everybody should deal with is it's not everyone else, it's you. And that, like, right there, if you can accept, because there are people in the world who cannot accept that fact, who absolutely cannot, right? They have the same repeating pattern in their life over and over and over again, and they're 100% sure that it's everyone else's fault. You know, so we'll start there, I think.
Okay, so I hope that Joanna is going to shout herself out here, because Joanna literally just did a really, really brilliant video about why she doesn't offer kind of shadow work teachings and stuff anymore. And I thought that she made some just amazing 10 out of 10 points. It was so good. I think I saw Kellyanne in the comments saying that she was going to make a like response video, and I'm so excited. I love this is the good stuff. I have a history of like mental illness and stuff, and I'm autistic, ADHD, all of that sort of fun stuff. So when it comes to delving real deep, I am very cautious, as I think generally speaking people should be. I think a couple of people have mentioned about it being kind of a trend almost to sort of be working with your shadow and all of this kind of stuff. And I just think that, you know, like reflection, introspection, most people could do with a little bit more of that. Maybe the world wouldn't be quite so much on fire. But like, I've definitely on like a personal level, you know, maybe you want to get into the like neurodivergence of it all. I've become at points so obsessed with self-development and self-improvement that it's basically become self-harm, that like I've hated myself so much that I've wanted to change things with things like shadow work. And so like all of me became shadow. And so I was always trying to find like the next thing to work on, because basically I just didn't like myself very much. And so I think you can definitely push it too far. And I think that's like the thing that I imagine a lot of us agree on, is that you just need to go easy with it. So like part of the question being like, is it necessary for effective spell work? No, I think like if you come across blockages and kind of like limiting beliefs that feel like, I think as Sanhre was saying earlier about like, if you believe you can't change, that's still a belief. And, you know, so those are things that kind of write down in there that can definitely affect kind of spell work and stuff in terms of like whether or not you believe in yourself and all of that kind of stuff. And so like that can do with maybe being teased out a little bit, but I don't think you need to be like plumbing the depths of your psyche all the time to be effective or to be, you know, a valuable member of your community or any of that kind of stuff. I think like just go, like there feels like sometimes there's a narrative where like you have to be like really digging deep into like the worst bits of your life and kind of accessing all of that trauma and all of that, finding the ways that you were traumatized and all of that stuff in order to be like a deep, interesting person or whatever. And it's like, babe, if you don't need to, just, you know, give yourself a bit of a break. That's mine. I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, thanks so much for shouting out my video. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So I'm not going to mention that. And just to like quickly add about what AB was talking about in terms of like coming to witchcraft, being a wounded person and, you know, basically dealing with that on top of being a practitioner. I think that shadow work in general as a practice can really help us with impulse control, which I think impulse control is really important if you're practicing witchcraft or the occult. Otherwise, if you make your decisions about your workings very impulsively, you might actually fuck yourself over a bit. So yeah, I can definitely see how that can help with spell work. But to answer the actual question, which was how do you use spell work to facilitate shadow work, I have to say that I don't really use spell work for that. I just don't see those two being connected with each other. But if I had to give like an actual magical answer for this, because we agreed we're kind of like avoiding mundane ones, right? I definitely see a value in engaging in trance work for this purpose. And I'm not sure if you folks are familiar. There's this really cool book that's called Feeding Your Demons. And it's actually based on this practice of chod from Tibetan Buddhism that's basically about giving yourself as an offering to your demons. And you can understand this within the psychological lens as your demons being your shadows or your demons being actual demons if you subscribe to the spirit model. So I believe that engaging in trance work for this particular purpose as part of your shadow work can be really beneficial, but you need to know what you're doing in order not to hurt yourself in the process. So that's something that's I definitely engage with, trance work and this practice of feeding your demons. I think it's great.
I have a multi-point answer. So first, yes, Joanna's video on shadow work, partially because she also comes from a psychological background, amazing. And yes, if echoing Sanhre, if you're not working with a psychotherapist, A, is not shadow work, and B, you should work with a psychotherapist, because if you dug up stuff that you're not able to handle because you have to do with trauma, maybe, it's, yeah, careful. I have a note, and I have to be the feminist anti-racist killjoy. I echo the point of Sanhre of, please, let's find another work for shadow work, because when you dig into it, the entire reason why Jung called it shadow so dark is because it's a racialized term, because in the early 1900s and late 1800s, the primal and uneducated and more animalistic way was seen as people that have darker skin color. So it would be nice to leave that behind. So I'm just putting it there because I'm never going to have such a big audience to suggest this to. So maybe look, there's a beautiful article by the British Psychotherapy Foundation that talks about Jungian racism, so just throwing it out there. I think Charlie Claire Burgess in Radical Tarot, beautiful book, it come from the tarot, stay for the intersectionality, and they mention about all the racist connotation of and appropriative connotations of a lot of things, and they I think propose the animal self rather than the shadow self. I do instantly recommend that. Going back to the original reason why I raised my hand, spell work and shadow work. There are a couple of books that I've seen talk about meditations of spell about that. One is Sacred Sex by Gabrielle Herstick, very useful to use that way if we're still like talking about parts of you that are traumatized or repressed and you need to work through. So there are rituals in that book for that, and I really like them. There's technically a book called Existential Kink. If you remember that there's a bit of victim blaming, and maybe we don't go for that, but it's an interesting take on how partially what Joanna was saying, like how about you give in to your demons, to your more primal side that's almost get off the bad stuff. It goes a bit into that, but as long as you remember that it's the tingy hint of victim blaming, maybe not. But that's me.
So I'll try to save myself from going on a whole rant about this topic because I have a lot of thoughts and feelings and I could talk about this for 45 minutes just myself. So I'll try to restrain myself a little bit. And for those that are not aware, one of the undergrad degrees that I'm currently going for is psychology. And I don't want to pretend I'm an expert. I don't have my full undergrad degree yet. I'm just now entering year 3 as of fall quarter. So over halfway there, which is really great. But so with that in mind, this is something I'm really passionate about. If you are not working with a Jungian psychologist, you are likely not doing shadow work in the original way it was intended. You can do shadow work adjacent activities, and I think that's so powerful and wonderful if we're talking about journaling prompts and things like that, recognizing your own patterns. I think that's all really valuable for anybody, not just witches, not just occultists, but just anybody in general, and recognizing the shadows that may exist in your psyche. And sometimes I wonder why the term shadow work is so thrown around, and part of me thinks it's because it's mysterious and cool. I think that it got this whole reputation because shadow work, like that sounds so mysterious, working with the shadows within yourself. But really, any kind of therapy is going to be good for getting in touch with yourself. I think it's really important for spell work to be effective, to know thyself, to strengthen your will, and to have a really strong will. You need to know yourself. You need to go to, oops, my timer just went off because I forgot to reset it for myself. But anyways, I think knowing yourself and being able to strengthen your will in that way and being mentally sound and mentally strong is really important, of course, for the effectiveness of your spell work and just, making yourself a better, more holistic practitioner overall. Do I think that, what was the second part of this? Is shadow work necessary for effective spell work? No, but I do think some form of healing or therapy is, because it doesn't have to be shadow work, but I do think that everyone needs therapy. And then I'll get off my soapbox if anybody wants to add to that.
One of the challenges that I have with the social media sellout of witchcraft is that when something becomes trend, sometimes does not become trend for the right reasons. And I love that the idea of inviting people to examine themselves is being given, especially within the witchcraft spaces, especially because, first of all, there's a lot of, and I say this with this utmost respect, there's a lot of individuals, both within and outside the witchcraft community, that have a lot of undiagnosed mental illness, and they need to be worked on. We need to be worked on. And one of the challenges that I find with when the whole shadow work situation is solved, which is something that Imogen touched on in social media, is that the way that a neurodivergent person and a person that maybe is taking medicine is not the same way that another person will dive into these topics or do certain meditations. I've gone in, I have that associated just by meditating, and I can, like, alone. So when I see people like with the whole journals and the whole situation, I love them, and I invite people to go through them. But there are certain elements that can be so difficult and different for other individuals that might be not necessarily neurotypical. And these are conversations that are needed to be had. I don't think that going to therapy makes you a better witch, but I do feel that it helps you to heal, because it's been my experience. And I think that in the 3 episodes that I've been here, I've always say therapy, go to therapy, because I mean it, because it's been life-changing for me. That's the only soapbox that I can stand on and preach from. So I reiterate on that, and I really reiterate on that.
Okay, so while we're on this like little kind of side quest tangent, I do need to be a wee bit of a killjoy, and not everyone can access therapy, and therapy is it's expensive, and also I think Joanna touched on this in her shadow work video. The psychological psychiatric industry needs a lot of decolonization work and needs to get its head out of its arse and stop pathologizing the human condition. And like, so I've been in therapy for a long time. I'm very lucky. I sound like this, I'm white, I've got, kind of a straight sized body. Like, I've had like possibly like the best possible experience of therapy. I live in Britain, I have the NHS, a lot of the therapy I've had has been free. Like, I'm in an immensely privileged position in terms of the therapy that I've been able to receive. And I know that that is simply not the case for the vast majority of people. There is a great deal of harm that can be done. So like, I take my autistic flat affect ass into a doctor and say, look, I'm in crisis. And they say, oh, okay, we'll give you X, Y, Z. My, counterpart who's more openly emotional, crying, weeping, visible self-harm and stuff, they get sent somewhere. They get put in, a unit, they get given a personality disorder diagnosis or whatever. And we have the same problem, we get treated very differently. And so there are therapists, counselors out there who are capable of doing great harm to people. And they are not, any of us, particularly in kind of like femme presenting bodies going to the doctor. We know what it's like to not be listened to. Psychologists and psychiatrists are a flavor of doctor. They are reliant on this industrial complex that chews us up and spits us out. Obviously, I'm not saying don't go to therapy. I've taken antidepressants for 15 years or whatever. I've been in therapy for a long time doing like different sorts of healing modalities and whatever. I'm very pro therapy and, take your tablets and all of that kind of stuff. But I do think that there's an element to it where we just need to be careful about just being like, oh, go to therapy. Therapy will sort out all of your problems. We need to kind of come together and do this sort of like more community healing. We all owe each other everything to kind of keep each other well, not just fob them off on some professional somewhere with a clipboard.
I just wanted to kind of reiterate that when I was saying about shadow work, calling it something different, right? I'm not in any way knocking people who are doing something incredible and calling it shadow work. I think that being very specific with your words is very important. And because it doesn't confuse the issue, right? So I was a chef for the majority of my adult life. That's where I worked until I started doing this. And I'm fairly certain that I can make the best burger on planet Earth. However, it would be foolish of me to open up a burger restaurant and call it Burger King, right? I would get sued and people would not know what the fuck, like what's going on here. Okay. So again, I think that the word use is very specific, but we have to acknowledge that there is something that exists within the realm of witchcraft in particular that people call shadow work, which isn't Jungian shadow work, which is incredibly valuable. And I also wanted to say, in terms of, does this make your spell work more effective? I'm going to say no. Not more effective, but more aimed in the direction you want it to be. Because emotional tuning is incredibly important to having your spell work be aimed in the right direction, right? But a shotgun can be more effective than a laser sometimes. And I've seen people do shotgun style magic that has crazy effects. It's very powerful, but maybe it was not aimed right where they wanted it to be.
Yeah, I don't want to go into this too much because I'm probably going to make a video that I've got notes for a video that kind of like explain a lot of these points that I think. But, you know, part of what the video was going to be was to speak to what Imogen said, and also the Polish folk, which that not everyone can access therapy. Also, sometimes a lot of the time when people access therapy, they can't do the mystical piece in therapy. Lots of people that come to me for one-on-one shadow work are already in therapy. They're in trauma therapy. It's discussed before we even begin. What are they doing? How aware are they of their issues already? What do they want to explore exactly? No one's allowed to come to me and just say, I just feel like I should do this. It looks cool. It looks interesting. I want to know what's down there. That's not how, you know, the work begins. It's more that they are aware of the concept, right? And there isn't actually a lot of heavy practice initially linked to the concept. The practice has grown exponentially. The reason it's called shadow work is because Jung originally came up with the concept of the shadow being whatever the ego is projected. And it's taken, but like all language, you can't really stop it from growing. It's like ivy growing on a house, and then it's like a jungle. You can't stop it. So yes, shadow work, we are talking about something different when we're talking mystically. But even people that are working with a Jungian psychoanalyst or doing deep trauma work with a therapist often find that their mystical framework is not taken into consideration. They have to do that piece with someone who understands and is versed in working with beings. What is the spirit model, psychological model, you know, magic, all that kind of thing. They want to talk to somebody who can do that piece. So it's not really possible to gatekeep it. And the other thing I wanted to say was, let's not pretend for a second that witches at large aren't the type of people that have the deep instinct to do this kind of work anyway. If I had a pound coin for every single time since 2012, when I put out my first shadow work video, a witch said, I'm already doing this. I'm doing it in ritual. I've done it with trance work. That is my instinct. I have known that there is a root behind it, like something right at the bottom. And I've tried to go there. And now you've told me what the name of the thing is, or a potential name of the thing could be. Like even Ivy said during this live, like I went to find the monsters, to slay them, to let them talk to me, I just do what you want to me. I am a vessel for whatever this experience is going to be. Shadow work is slightly different in that we're not looking at it like that. We're looking at it psychologically, but it's an instinct for a lot of people who come to the occult. They are the type of people who will then go, oh, okay, so there is kind of because I've been doing this. I've been actually doing this. I've been writing down my findings. So even when someone isn't in trauma therapy and wouldn't choose to be, because it's actually not in their paradigm of belief, they do not actually trust a lot of that. And there's fair arguments why that would be too. But even so, like a lot of witches are shadow workers who just don't know it. The argument about the name change, that's a different conversation. And I have thoughts about that, and that's valid. But like it's called shadow work because of the original concept. It's grown massively beyond that. It's been adopted by mystics and spiritualists because they do it instinctively anyway. And they have added, I think, just as much value in some cases as academia has added. And so, you know, you can't gatekeep something people naturally do. And, you know, I think it's a lot of the time with the people I work with, particularly one-on-one, they are in therapy, which not everybody can access anyway, but a lot of them are and cannot explore the mystical side within therapy because they don't have the context for what we're talking about here and wouldn't know where to begin with that. So it's really like a bit of a mix and match type of vibe.
I don't have anything to add really. I just wanted to say this is not something that I really engage with. It's not something that I think is necessarily responsible to do in combination with one's practice. But that being said, I have really appreciated everyone's perspectives that you've been sharing. And it's given me a lot to think about. So yeah, just thank you for being so open with your thoughts.
I just want to say that if anybody is interested in therapy witchiness, go to Kellyanne's channel, because Kellyanne has an entire backlog of amazing videos talking about how to heal oneself from within and self-care. Like, Kellyanne's self-care series is the best. So if anybody needs some guidance there, that's the plug. So our next prompt is going to be prompt 12. How do you incorporate channeling divine or higher energies into your spell work? What practices do you use to ensure a clear and safe connection? And this can also kind of lead us into trance work and things that we do in the astral realm to work with these entities. Wow, no one wants to go first. I'll go first. Oh, Sanhre, did you want to go, or do you want me to go?
You go first. You never go first. You go first.
Okay.
I'll go after you.
All right. Well, I didn't plan for any of these questions, so I'm sure if I sat down and planned, I could have a whole list of things I do. But I think one of the first things that comes to mind for me is tree branching. If I'm going to connect to some sort of source above and wanting to channel that that entity, that inspiration, that divine presence, what I do is I typically focus on centering my energy, grounding my energy to the earth, of course, because feeling grounded is obviously very important when you're channeling. And then I would go into a tree branching exercise where the tree leaves or the tree branches kind of extend from your crown and reach up towards the sky. And you envision them growing further and further up into the astral and then drawing upon that energy. And depending on the entity that you're channeling or you're working with, maybe that energy looks a little different. Maybe it's electric, maybe it's blue, maybe it's gold, purple, violet, whatever it happens to be, and you would draw it through the tree branches in through your crown and allow yourself to go into a trance-like state. So I think trance work is essential for channeling. Like, if you can't get yourself into an altered state of consciousness, it's so difficult to channel anything. So I definitely think trance work is necessary. To the second part of this question, what practices do you use to ensure clear and safe connection? For me, that just goes back to divination, using various divination methods that are specific to the entity that you're working with. So maybe potentially having certain tarot decks that are assigned to certain spirits that you're working with, or maybe you use dowsing rods instead of a pendulum, you know, whatever works for this specific spirit. Because I've found that I have my favorites, right? Like, I love working with tarot cards, but there are some spirits that I work with where dowsing rods just works so much better. Or my glyph set when I'm talking to Thoth works way better than any other tarot deck that I have. So I think really cultivating a system where you're changing your divination methods based on the spirit that the way it wants to communicate with you, I think is really helpful. And that's kind of what I have off the top of my head. So I'll let everyone else answer because I don't want to take up too many answers. So Kellyanne, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So basically it's interesting. I've worked with like my primary being I work with is Hel from the North Pantheon. I've worked with her since like 2011. I have never petitioned her to help me with anything. I always feel like she's present, sometimes more present, sometimes less present. All the beings I work with are invited to be present. They're invited to assist if they want to. But during workings, all the energy is intended to be really like just from me, because I kind of feel like I contain all the energies of those beings. So to me, the entities are mirrors. So most of my work with Hel is about discovering where Hel resides inside me. It's kind of a you know, the primordial consciousness essence of things, where all of the archetypes, beings, energies, personalities, etc., are mine for the taking. It just depends what I connect with most, what I choose to grow, what I choose to place focus on. So I almost come into a lot of my spell work and a lot of my material situations with Hel energy. So it's almost like a non-stop evocation in a way. In fact, someone just said to me the other day, you know, your sassy video that you made, I felt like you were channeling Hel in that moment. It was very boundary oriented and very, I just got a Hel vibe, and you had the portrait of her behind, and I was like, wow, this is, I'm watching an evocation. And that's probably quite true. So that goes into spell work with me. I never ask for, I don't petition beings for anything. In fact, if they really, really helped me out, I wouldn't want to know. I would not want them to tell me. But what I do with beings, especially with Hel, but others as well, is I do ask them to help me with making magical decisions. Not too long ago, I couldn't figure out whether or not to do a working, and I immediately went to Hel and asked, and she said, you need to hold your horses, like stop right now. You do not have all the information. You need to wait. And I was like, oh, all right, mother, fair enough. So that vibe of like, I'm not sure, I think my ego might be getting in the way, or maybe whatever, that I will go to beings for. But once I'm in the circle, as it were, it's on me, it's my energy, and I'm bringing it in, but I'm not requesting assistance. I'm not petitioning. I don't feel I'm working with beings. I feel like they might be interested, watching maybe, but it's me, it's my working.
In my case, I am very careful about using the word channeling, because Ivy mentioned about altered state of consciousness. And as I always say, I try stuff, I throw stuff at the wall, and I hope for the best. So being certain of being able to say, oh, actually, I was in alpha or in theta state, I never know. I hope for the best. Usually when a ritual or a spell works, clearly I was somewhere. But that's that's my discerning, and it comes later. It comes with effects. That being said, I pretty much always invite the deities that I work with and my ancestors during any kind of spell work that I do. I got more used to do the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram before I do spell work. The aim was to do it daily, but it takes energy. It gives you a lot, but it also requires a lot. And I'm a spoony witch, so I try. But yeah, before doing spell work, definitely just so that I have a clean slate. And therefore, afterwards, I vocally invite the deities that I work with, my ancestors. I explain what the intention is here, and to enhance and protect my magic, especially when I do workings about prosperity or success. That's something that I work with Venus, Aphrodite. She's been very interested in that kind of stuff for me. So on the matter of having clarity, I echo what Ivy said. Like, yeah, definitely, I have decks dedicated to each of my deities. They each have one, sometimes more than one. I have a deck for my grandparents specifically, and usually tarot is the best way that works for me. Sometimes pendulum works amazing with my wife. Pendulums do not want to work with me no matter what I do, but my wife, it's scary to watch, especially being a sometimes skeptical witch. Like I see how things change physically, and I'm like, it's not possible. So sometimes that to have more clarity about what happened. I don't know if it's channeling, but it's definitely, hey, I'm here, I'm doing this. If you feel like lend a hand, this would be the time. And also, side note, usually what works for me in doing spell work is becoming less and less specific about the outcome that I want. So I want a feeling. I want that is the feeling of success. Does it reflect in this job? Does it reflect in this amount of money? That, you know, universe, carte blanche to you. But this is and the more I do that, the more I see stuff working. So I trust that all these entities that I called clearly listened.
So I actually wanted to ask about, like, if you could specify me a little bit in regards, what do you mean with channeling? Are we talking a little bit about adorcism, as in being possessed and literally be embodied the spirit or higher energy? Or are we just talking about channeling as in we are connecting with this higher spirit, this spirit energy, and communicating directly with them? Like, what does channeling means in this context?
I left it ambiguous for that exact purpose. I wanted to be able to talk about the various points, like what does channeling actually mean to you? And one of
Okay.
the things that I was briefly going to bring up is even channeling divine moments of inspiration when you're not in an altered state of consciousness, and it literally just comes in like this stroke of genius and you're like, holy shit. So we can take this in any direction you want.
Love that. Oof. All right. Okay, so I'm going to begin with my bias. I'm not very, you are very, at least 3 people here are aware that I struggle with like experiencing the spiritual in a very physical way. I don't listen shit, I don't see shit. What I perceive is a change of energy in the room. I'm very, very emphatic about this. So parting from that, I mentioned already that I had an opportunity that I was meditating and I disassociated. Meditation, well done on my end. I really can go in deep. I do not use any type of substance because they really affect me. The last and only experience that I had really, really fucked me up. And I say, nope, we are going Buddhist on this route, only meditation and breath work. That's what we are doing in this household. So how do I incorporate channeling? I recently took, again, class with Sarah Masters, and one of the classes was focused on adorcism, pretty much inviting a spirit in and being filled up by their energy. In Christianity, I experienced something along those lines, being able to feel by the Holy Spirit and speak in tongues or whatever, another conversation, but I was shocked to see that it was quite similar within witchcraft and Christianity. So I will just let people whatever they want to do with that. So what do? I do meditate. I sit down. I count backwards 100 to 1 3 times. And once that I am in a space of no thought, I have a written down invocation. It's complex. It changes according to who I am calling in. But when I want to get direct answers, I go on to a guided meditation, or I utilize my tarot deck. Recently, I tried to do Black Mirror evocation, but it was not a Black Mirror. It was literally an image of Solomon, and it was incredible. It was dark, and I literally changed Solomon's face, start changing, and it was such a powerful experience. So the way that I just I make a boundary around my space with different prayers, and I clearly say who I'm calling for. I do feel that creating a circle does work for me. So that on that. And yeah, I think that I know that it's working when I feel that change in the energy on the room. That's the only way that I can say, oh, it's working. And I always bring the example of you are in the computer and you feel someone coming into the bedroom and you are not turning around, but you feel, oh, someone is here. Oh, how's it going? Well, it's the same situation, but with spirits. So that is like a combination of the response that I have for 12, how to incorporate channeling, and how to use a spell work to aid on deep trance. Let's leave it there. I think that I'm going to start going all over the place. So for now, this is it.
So I personally don't really work with divine or higher energies. For me, it's mostly like either chthonic beings, spirits of the land, spirits of place. I work a lot with the dead as well. So my practice is more, I guess, rooted in down there as opposed to up there. And what I do to, again, I would like to avoid using the word channeling, because that for me is kind of practiced in conjunction with being possessed by a spirit. But I don't want to go there with this particular question. So in order to connect with them, right, for the purpose of spell work or ritual, I would mostly incorporate trance states, dream work as well, if I want to learn something or gain information, and divination, of course. But divination is like the easiest method where, for me at least, it takes the least effort in terms of entering altered states of consciousness. But when it comes to trance work in particular, I find that this is something that is the most developed in my practice when it comes to contacting spirits. So I would alternate methods, and that would be either entering trance through drumming or ecstatic body movements, which can really look kind of sick if you would look at it from the outside. Fortunately, I'm usually alone when I do that. What I really like is how I call it hypnagogic immersion, which is using the hypnagogia states that you experience right before you fall asleep or after you wake up, and utilizing that as a kind of entry point into altered states or into trance, as well as autogenic training, which is a very particular method of deep body relaxation. I'm actually trained in it as well as a professional, so it's really handy for trance work. And you can actually find like free guided autogenic training like tracks online on YouTube, anywhere. So I highly recommend trying that for people who find it hard to enter trance states or like see things, hear things. As AB, you were saying, like it's hard for you. Try autogenic training, but you need to try it for like a while on regular intervals. And I guarantee sooner or later you will experience a bit more because it's amazing, and it's actually been studied. It's been created by a psychiatrist. Really great method, and it also helps with, you know, a lot of other stuff, but I don't want to digress too much. So yeah, that's how I would approach this, mostly through trance states. I believe that they are, for me at least, the most powerful. And what I also want to add here, I still have 1 minute, okay. What I want to add here as well is that for me, as a practitioner of folk magic and traditional witchcraft, it's also kind of better, I guess, or better looked at by the spirits if you meet them halfway and not if you just invoke them into your place, because it kind of seems like you're summoning them, you know, kind of like your boss summons you to their office to do something, right? In my work, in my witchcraft, we prefer to meet the spirit halfway or even go to them in order to do the work, because it's kind of sharing the load of the work that's supposed to be done. So yeah, I'm going to end here.
Okay, so channeling is a super important part of my practice. This is probably the first really powerful spiritual experience I ever had, and it radically changed my practice, because prior to that, I was practicing magic purely from an atheistic, like Levian or mind model point of view for almost 20 years, and then that all got flipped upside down. Of course, entering an altered state of consciousness or a trance state is how you do it, right? That's just how it's done. That can happen on accident or it can happen on purpose. For me, it happened on accident the first time, and then I learned about using audio technology like binaural beats and meditation, and it got me really into this, and then I started doing it intentionally. And it was a wild ride, and for several years I was like, is this really happening, or am I like nuts, or what's going on? But I would write everything down, and Ivy, if it's okay with you, I could even link to a video of a channeling experience I've had. And then all this shit came true, and then I started to really trust it. I remember being told in a channeling experience almost 10 years ago that within 10 years AI would become extremely pervasive and turn into a huge problem, which is happening like right now as we speak. And I was like, nah, that's gonna be fine. And I didn't believe it. So I really learned to trust it, and I think channeling is incredible, and it's something that I would almost say everybody should try and get into, because you can channel your own higher self. Right, for one thing, you can channel your spirit guides. I would say what's incredibly important with channeling is having a target spirit, and like don't ever go into the state like open to just talking to whoever is available to talk. I know that you do that, Ivy, but you even said don't recommend that to other people, right? Same deal. I would not recommend that ever to any of my students. I think that'd be very irresponsible. And because I made the mistake once of kind of doing that, because a friend talked me into doing a Ouija board, which was fucking stupid. And immediately I had a very negative feeling about it, and I got the hell out of there. Anyways, yeah, that's my answer. I think channeling is incredible. I think it's important. I think you can divine incredible information that is really pertinent to your life, and that this is a practice that is also just good for your brain. Getting into like hemisync states of consciousness, getting out of your left brain and into your right brain, accessing higher intelligence. It's like, for me, that's the good stuff.
Okay, so I want to like talk about like the flip side of that, because I am someone that is kind of like always open. So there is like, you know, always like a spirit showing up, you know, in my realm. So I kind of try to do things to, a lot of times I have to like set the boundaries with the spirits, like, you know, not right now. This is, you know, not the time to do this. But a lot of the ways that if I want to channel a specific a spirit, for me, what's important is like the correspondences of this spirit. So being able to identify with those things and tap in energetically based on those things. But I think it is, for me at least, important to have like and I think it was mentioned, to have your spirit team, right? Because it's important for me to have that because those are energies that I am familiar with because I work with them, you know, daily. So it kind of helps me identify like trickster spirits, right? Like, oh, this is not that energy. So who are you coming into my space? But for me to connect and channel, like to home in on it, to have the focus, because like I said, it's like spirits constantly show up for me. It's like right now, there's like you know, sometimes when I am, and I don't want to go off on I want to try to stay the course, but I often tell people if I seem like I'm distant or going off in a conversation of my own in my head, it's because a spirit has presented themselves. So I have to work on kind of keeping them out. So mine is kind of the reverse. But definitely for me is having things to identify the spirit with is important.
I want to reply back to something that Ysha said way back in the beginning of this conversation, because you were talking about how you don't necessarily know, you know, certain brainwave states that you're in. You don't know if you're in alpha, you don't know if you're in theta. I don't feel like that's necessary. It's helpful, yes. And that's something I talk about on my channel a lot. I think it's really helpful to know the altered states that you're in. But I think sometimes channeling just happens without us realizing, like I was talking about with AB, that moment of inspiration, that stroke of genius or whatever. And I think if we were to just lean into these moments of channeling, sure, I think an altered state of consciousness is absolutely necessary to maintain a channeled state. If you're going to actually channel a spirit and then try to speak or, you know, gain inspiration that way and maintain it. But those little moments, I don't know, I don't like to gatekeep the word channeling. I'm a little loosey-goosey when it comes to that, because I think everybody kind of does it here and there and they just don't really realize it. And then I wanted to say too, another tip that I have for trying to get yourself, if you don't particularly care for the tree branching method, another method that I use, oh my God, I did it again. I forgot to reset the timer. Okay, sorry guys. Another method that I use is, let's say I'm working with Medusa and I am traveling in my mind. So going into an altered state of consciousness, you know, relaxing your body. And then you're traveling to wherever that god, goddess, higher spirit, whatever it is that you're wanting to channel, going to their home. Where do they reside? In the mountains, at a lake? You know, what's the mythology? What's the folklore around this creature? Go to where they are home. And when you're there, you're visualizing all the things around them and what that environment looks like. And then when you approach this entity, and of course, obviously you want to build a relationship with this entity over time, but having them walk around the backside of you and then walking into your body, visualizing them actually walking into your body and filling up your entire being and trying to let go of your own essence as much as possible. Not in the sense like you're having an ego death or something, but really just allowing the experience and letting it move through you. And so even letting your body movements change, you know, the way you move your hands, the way you talk, everything about yourself, envisioning how they would do it instead. And it's almost like a practice of really, really letting go. So that's another method I've used before, is the walk around behind and then enter the body. But I'm also a little bit more we're not rebellious, what's the word, experimental than most people. So I understand that not everybody is comfortable with that. So that's my advice.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something briefly about semantics. So as I've been listening to everyone talking, I've been thinking, what is wrong with me? Why am I having an argument with myself? Why am I confused? Why am I thinking something isn't quite right about the way I'm relating to all this? And it's because, as a couple of other people said, like just semantically for me, I realized I wouldn't use the word channeling, because a lot of what people are talking about, I do. Like I said, I don't necessarily link it to spellcraft, but like I do it in devotional work. I do a lot of the things you just described. Like I literally go into the environment, I explore the mythology. I have a specific place where I meet my matron deity, and a specific sort of like process that I go through where the way I say it is in communion with her. So if I'm in communion with a being, it's like I'm dialoguing with them, you know, and I can do that through divination, but mostly I like to do it astrally. And I get a lot from that, a lot of information, a lot of healing, a lot of cosmic bitch slaps that I needed, and all of that kind of thing. So a lot of the things that are being described under the banner of channeling, I just want to say I do it. I call it communing with. And to me, I've always thought of channeling as, you know, I think the Polish folk which said it best, kind of like more possession, where I'm not there, like I'm allowing something to, like channel writing, where later on you look at the page and you're like, oh well, I have no idea I wrote that. That's for me. I came by my hand physically, but I was not there. But yeah, basically it's just a semantic thing, and people have definitely come at me for my use of wording in my books and stuff. They're like, that's not what it is, it's actually this. And I'm like, well, I don't like that, it doesn't make sense to me, so I use this. So yeah, I'm not getting at anyone, I'm just saying I was listening to this going, oh, a channel, I do these things, yeah, sorry, but it's just a different thing. I call it communing, yeah, because I'm still there, but they're very much there dialoguing with me.
I probably think of channeling a little bit different than some people here, and I'm going to get into a little bit of philosophy, so bear with me. My perspective when it comes to magic is very much similar to the Renaissance and medieval period. And during that time, Platonic thought was obviously very popular, inspired a lot by Aristotle. And there's this idea by Plato called the Great Chain of Being, where you have a hierarchy of things with the god or creator, whoever you want to call that, at the top. And then it kind of goes down this chain, right? And then, you know, like Agrippa talks about the three worlds and how you have like each world is divided, but it's still in this chain, right? And so when it comes to ideas like channeling, for me, it's not so much about channeling a specific spirit, although that happens. And it's more about like drawing down the energy, right? Like from like down the chain to whatever you're getting at. And so, for example, if I was going to do a working in this case, one of the things that I think is really important to do kind of in the material world is to set your space up in a sense where it is really inviting to the spirit that you're trying to call. So if I'm trying to call a solar spirit, right, I'm doing things like making sure that my space smells solary, whatever that might be to you, right? Like cinnamon or whatever. Burning incenses that are favorable to solar spirits, having a lot of yellow, having a lot of gold, having things that have, you know, represented kings, right? Like kingship is a very solar thing. And like if you're doing stuff with materia, doing things with things that have solar correspondences, yellow cloth, yellow bags, yellow markers, yellow plates, like all of it. And then, you know, you can do other things like in the ceremonial sphere, we often will do things like the greater ritual of the hexagram or heptagram really. And it's things like I might do that for the zodiacal sign of Leo, which is very solar. I might also do it for the sun itself, right? And so creating what I like to call like magical pressure in your environment to kind of draw down the energy and make it a very favorable place for those solar spirits to exist. And it's not channeling so much as like in the classical sense as it is letting kind of this, I don't really know how to describe it, like this veil of solar energy, like really radiate throughout your space. And then that in and of itself kind of opens you up to like that, I hate using the term energy because it's not definable, but to like that energy. And when you are more attuned to it, it's easier for them to communicate with you and kind of give you that information. And so that's really more of what I consider channeling. And that's just with my experience in the sense that when we talk about ritual, like it really happens to be in ritual. I am not somebody who is open outside of ritual. I frankly don't want to be, and except in very explicit moments. But in ritual, like really that space of drawing down the energy to make it a good place for the spirit to be also attunes you to it and opens you up to that communication. And this idea is actually also mentioned and talked about in the Picatrix. This idea that like before you do ritual, it's really important to ensure that you also hold that influence with what you're going to be working. So if you're going to do a Saturnian working, right, you might be eating food that is very Saturnian. So you might eat like goat curry one night because goat is a animal associated with Saturn. You might dress in all black. You might, you know, sing hymns of Saturn, like do all this kind of like very much in Solomonic magic where we have our preparations kind of before we do anything. It's the same thing, except it's more planetary in nature. And that is your purification. That is your preparation for the actual ritual that you're doing. And by doing that, you are in essence channeling, in a sense, the energy of that thing, right? Because you are doing things associated with it. And I just think it makes it easier for you to commune with the spirits that you're calling. But yeah, that would be my answer to that.
Thank you, Astra, because I'm realizing as you're speaking, I'm like, oh yeah, I do all that. I do that too. You know, like whenever other people speak, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a thing. No, bringing correspondences in, specific incense, you know, scent or whatever. But one thing I wanted to reply to with Kellyanne talking about communion versus channeling. I do actually think there's a difference between communion and channeling. I think that some of the techniques are very similar, entering a trance-like state, you know, traveling to where they are. And I do think there is a slight difference between being in that altered state of consciousness and having a conversation with that entity and communing versus more of a possession of channeling them into your body and having them take over while you kind of go to the wayside. It kind of reminds me of tulpamancy a little bit when I did my video on tulpas, because there's different, like there's parallel processing, and then there's full-on possession where you have the tulpa take full possession of your body while you are completely offline. So I do think that there's a difference, but I think the lines can get really blurred with those two practices. So I just had to say that, not that I'm going to sit here and define each one, just wanted to throw that out there.
Sorry, I was going to mention one other thing, but I totally forgot to talk about because I got too entranced in what I was going on about. But Joanna made a comment when they were speaking about how, you know, sometimes it's better to go to the astral and engage with the spirits there to do the work, right? I don't really fully agree. I think it's a beautiful concept and it's one that I've heard a lot of places, but I don't necessarily agree because in a sense, like, the spirits are doing their thing in the spirit world, and like that is their world. That's where their nature fits best. And so I think really, like, when we engage with spirits, it's a matter of us doing our work in the material world to then allow them to do their work in the spiritual, right? And because of that great chain of being that I talked about earlier, like there is a connection there. And so it's not that, and they're not separate, really, is I think what I'm trying to get at. But I think, like, really generally speaking, at least within kind of my ceremonial perspective, like, our place is in the material, and we are, you know, very lucky to engage with the spiritual and have them, you know, involved in our lives. But there is kind of a separation in like who is doing what. And so to me, like, I don't want to get in the way of something that a spirit is doing. Like, I've had this experience where sometimes spirits will be like, you are in the way, get out of the way, like, let us do our job. And it's like, okay, like, sure, right? And so I think it's more about, for me at least, giving them the materials that they need in order to be successful in what they're doing in the material, and then trusting that they will do their job in the spiritual. And if they don't, frankly, I have ways to deal with that. But that is something that I did want to touch upon as well. I thought it was interesting. We have different perspectives.
Okay, so I wanted to add something, and this is like weird and abstract, so bear with me here because it was a memory that I had. So I play guitar, and like this is probably 15 years ago. I was playing guitar, and where I would play guitar was at a storage space that I rented, which was like totally illegal, but every band in town was doing this, right? I have a buddy, Wade, who I hadn't seen in a long time, and I was out there playing guitar in the middle of the night, and I was playing some Metallica song, and I stopped playing for a moment. And then I heard somebody was playing along with me from across the way. It was Wade playing bass. And I walked over there to see him. And I feel like channeling is so much like that experience, where you have like a tune or a frequency, right? Brainwave states are frequencies. And a spirit can choose to match it, but you have to match the frequency to get there. And then from that point, you have to kind of learn to play a melody or like jam together. And in that exchange is really where, like, I guess what I would call like magic happens. Really, the channeling experience is in that. So you're finding the frequency, you're matching the frequency, and then you're learning to have a melody together. And you know, I don't know what this is really adding to the conversation, but it felt important to me to say, so I just wanted to add that in.
And I wanted to add to what Astralogical was talking about with going to the spirit versus summoning them in, and how that would differ depending on the way you practice. Basically, I appreciate that it looks different for everybody, and I think especially the difference between like more ceremonial approach versus more like tradcraft or folk witchcraft approach is that at least in folk witchcraft that has this animist flavor in particular, the way we work is we want to really make a point of not engaging in any man-made hierarchies when it comes to spirit work. So that's why we want to treat the spirits as equals. And that's why you kind of want to, as I was saying, make sure that everybody's like they are not doing the main bulk of the work. And it's kind of like a way of being respectful towards the spirits, to go to them so that they don't have to take the extra steps. But that doesn't mean that you're also not providing all the kind of foundations in the physical world for the spirit to then do the work for you if they agree to do so in the first place, because they need to agree. This needs to be consensual. That's how you kind of work if you are an animist. So I totally appreciate your perspective, but yeah, just wanted to add this for more context, maybe why I approach it the way I do. So yeah.
Yeah, the last three comments have been really illuminating for me. Just the talk of like great chain of being, which I just got really, really interested in a while ago, and the notion of like, you know, that there is a connection already kind of thing. It's just a question of like the mechanics of coming into very, very close alignment, close as you can get into alignment with that part of the energy, and then the discussion about melody and harmony and music, and then the discussion about like, it's like a dance basically. It's like and that puts a very different perspective on it for me. And I do get what you're saying, Ivy, about the difference between, and that is worth mentioning, that there is that differentiation. But this part of the conversation has just got me very excited, and I've opened my journal and I'm writing copious amounts of notes. So thank you all very much. That's all I want to say.
I actually, what I was going to add is that I definitely love to get to see the differences, like for example, ceremonial practices, and also like the cultural aspect of other spaces. Like for example, and again, shockingly, I'm from Venezuela, and my culture. Wow, I did. If I didn't mention that I'm from Venezuela, I apologize. In my culture, we have a section. It's called the Sorte Mountain, or La Montaña de Sorte, and this mountain in my country is the living embodiment and the palace of a goddess that is from Venezuela. One of our goddesses she's called Maria Leonza. Oh, well, it's a name given. And funnily, you can access to Maria Leonza through her images, but in order for you to actually meet her, you have to go to that place. And I want to bring this silly example to also take in consideration that like the cultural or maybe practices or cultural differences according practices. Like I definitely agree that with a good structured ceremony, you can bring maybe invite the spirit in, and obviously you have the image and all of that. But if you want to meet Maria Alonso, you have to go there. There's no other way. There's no other way. Like maybe she can come over here. Hey, how's it going? But you want to do something serious with her, you have to go to that mountain. And I'm sure that there are many traditions around the world that follow that similar pattern. And there's a difference between a FaceTime and seeing in person and having an actual date with a person. That's the type of thing that I'm trying to bring in. So yeah. I don't know. I just wanted to add that. That's all.
Yeah, I really love that you said this, because I think that was missing from what I wanted to put across as well. I think this is cultural as well, and it's deeply ingrained, especially if you work with spirits of the land or local spirits, as opposed to like spirits that I guess folks work with all over the world. For some spirits, it's very particular where you need to go, what you need to do, how you need to approach that. And otherwise, you can't really gain contact, as you were saying, with the goddess that resides in that mountain where you need to go to actually have that encounter. It's the same, for example, in Polish folk magic, we have like hundreds of folkloric devils. And if you want to go out there to them and get something from them, you need to actually go out from your home. You can't even do spirit flight to go there in spirit. You need to be there with your body. You need to risk the integrity of your flesh in order to gain that respect of the spirit, their attention, and attempt anything in the first place, right? So I think that's also maybe important to say that I think ceremonial approaches are more like global friendly, where they can be more devoid of the cultural elements that are very specific. Whereas folk magic, the way we practice, is very rooted in the land where we are, and we don't get to choose those things as much, I suppose. Yeah. Thank you for that comment, AB. I thought that was really important to add.
Okay, as the resident ceremonial magician, I am going to push back a little bit, which is that it's not that we are not local. I mean, there is some benefit in the fact that, like, when you work in the grimoire tradition, you have spirits, you have spirit lists essentially that you can pick from and call down or call up. It depends with what you're working with. But like that being said, there is a lot of importance placed on making sure that you do things at appropriate locations. So it's like a ceremonial magician is not somebody who simply does ritual in a place and we only do it there. Like there is great importance sometimes put upon, depending upon the spirits that you're working with. Like, do I need to do this on a mountaintop? Do I need to do this by a stream? Do I need to do this in the forest? Like, those are all considerations, and they're very real parts. Actually, it was, oh, who was it? I think it was Joseph Peterson, and Stephen Skinner has mentioned this too, in his recent translation of the Lucidarium, and his translation of the Heptameron. But he mentions explicitly that like it is actually better. Like if we had to put like everything into a list of like best to worst within the ceremonial like magic system, it is better to do it outside, where you can really engage with the spirits of the land. Because even if you're calling up one singular spirit, the fact that you're working magic, it stirs the area. And so other spirits will come and they can oftentimes assist. I mean, it just depends on what's going on, right? Like it is truly better to be doing your ritual outside than it is to be doing it in your home. Like that would be a preference to be had. And I'm reminded of the story where Moses went out to the mountain to meet God, right? And this idea that like, it wasn't good enough for him to meet God in a valley. Like he had to go to the highest point in order to have that interaction. So like that locale conversation that we were having, like it is critical. It's also critical in ceremonial magic, really depending upon what you're doing. Like if you're working with chthonic spirits, right? Let's say that you want to work with the Goetia. It is really to your benefit to go to the lowest point that you can find and work with them there, right? I mean, treasure spirits, it's all about that, right? They will take you to a location to then show you where the treasure is. So that's a misconception that I think people have in ceremonial magic, about ceremonial magic. And I just wanted to reiterate that like, it's actually something that we have in common.
I have been loving this conversation. I feel like we've just had so many good conversations this episode. Also, my eyes are bleeding. No, just kidding. But like all of us, I think, are really getting to that point where we've been recording too much. So we're going to take a quick 5-minute break. And then when we come back, we are going to, for everybody watching this video, we are going to do the fastest speed round ever. And we're all going to be limited to 1 minute. So during this break, everybody can grab their ritual tools that they want to talk about. Or maybe you have no ritual tools and you like to just use your mind, whatever it happens to be. And then we'll all go around and kind of share some important ritual tools. So we'll be back. So our last and final prompt is going to be number 13. What ritual tools do you consider essential for your spell work? How do you consecrate and maintain these tools? And you don't have to answer both of these questions, but if you want to do like a little show and tell of your favorite ritual tool, because we are all limited to 1 minute for our speed round, go ahead. For whoever wants to go first, go for it.
Yeah, quick, short and sweet. My tarot deck. That's it. I used to have wands. I used to have cauldrons. No, a glass of water and a candle is enough for any spell work that I do. My tarot deck, though, for any kind of like divination about the spell, about if it's worth doing the spell, about like talking with my ladies and ancestors, and to consecrate it. I used to do something complicated with oils and stuff. Lazy witch, spoony witch. I keep a new deck next to my pillow for 3 nights, and then I do an interview spread, and that's that. And they don't fail me.
I love the interview spread vibe, like getting to know the deck. I took the wording very seriously on this. What is essential? And nothing is essential for my magic except my mind. There is no other consistency whatsoever. I don't want that consistency. So the only thing that has to be there and working is like my cognition, my imagination, you know, like, and that gives me access to the astral, to deity connection, to ideas about what to do, all of that. So there really probably is only one physical tool that I would say is necessary, and it never comes into my spellcraft, but it's my journal. I always have one. I'm always writing in it. I've been writing in it during this live, and really it's a way for me to maintain my mental well-being and check on what is happening with me, which is very necessary for me. And I think if that is happening, that's fine, and I consecrate it by just like I put a protection thing on the inside, and then I consecrate it by constantly keeping it to me and knowing that it's a piece of me. I always have one.
Okay, so I fully agree with what Kellyanne just said. The journal is the most important tool that a practitioner has. I also, of course, love my tarot decks, but I wanted to talk about a wand, which I can't show you because I don't have it anymore. And this is something that's really sad to me, but I still think about it all the time. So I acquired this wand while reading tarot at like a festival that was very like almost Renaissance fair like, and it was made of resin, which is plastic. Okay, it's a plastic wand, but the guy who made them had his booth and he had this whole setup and it was really cool. And the way that you chose the wand, he would not show, you couldn't pick it based on what it looked like. You had to put your hand over all these wrapped wands and pick one and buy it. That was, he wouldn't sell it to you otherwise. And so I did this, and the wand that I chose had this snake on it that looked precisely like the sigil that I used for my logo. It was dead on, exactly like what I had drawn, and I loved it so much. And I had it for several years, and then one day I sat on it and broke it. And I have not yet found one that's been an adequate replacement. But yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, so you said show and tell, and I took that personally. So I have some tools to show, but just want to add, like, nothing's really essential, like as folks were saying here. You can do it, nothing or anything, right? But yeah, here are some tools that I find really important in my practice. One of them is this traditional, it's actually leather mask that you use for working with the dead. This is for a specific ritual from our Slavic tradition. Another thing that's essential is a drum, which I already mentioned, for trance work purposes. Here's a set of tapping bones. If you know, you know. Also, prayer beads. This is a rosary. I use rosaries, but I changed them because my practice is very heretical. It's not really Catholic folk. So yeah. Other than that, also a rattle. And finally, a stang. You can't really see the whole thing. It's big, but yeah, so that's my shit. Thank you.
Okay, so this isn't really a tool, but these are things that I go back to again and again. And one is music to clear space, and I use very specific music, which is Gregorian chant music, which just it does something to me, so I use it because it takes me to completely another headspace. I also, of course, use candles. I mean, that's pretty much a given. And the other thing that I use regularly is my wand, which is made out of wood. So, and honestly, I do not have any specific ritual to consecrate anything. Like for the wand, just because I use it for that singular purpose, that in and of itself is consecration for me.
So for me, because I love like all things Venusian, I know it's going to be like typical, but my cauldron, I can have everything else could be gone, but I need my cauldron because I am a pyro at heart. I need to burn something every time I do ritual. And so that's a must-have for me, but also 100% music. Yes, love Gregorian chants, but yeah, music and fire.
Okay, I'm going to go through this really quickly. There's unfortunately a lot of tools that I use as the ceremonial magician that I cannot show you because they've been consecrated, but I am going to show you something. Okay, I don't know if you can see these. So these haven't been consecrated, which is the only reason why you're allowed to see them. But they are wooden plates that have been painted. Contrasting colors is something you see in the Golden Dawn, and they have the Kamea, you have the intelligence and the spirit of the planet, you have the archangel, and you have the Olympic spirit here at the bottom. These are what I use to consecrate the majority of my materia, in addition to a particular ritual. But the other thing I wanted to show you was this. It looks like nothing, but I'm a huge believer when I make my oils that they all retain the essence of oils before, if you will. And so these little discs, I just got them off of Amazon, which, take what you off of that. But I fill them with an oil. Each oil is specific to the planet that I work with. And I have little oil wicks that I use that I put in and light. But every time I make an oil, I will actually pull from this. These are used in devotional work. Pretty much all of my work they're used in. So taking bits from these, putting them in oils, or putting things from my oils into those is how I use them.
I feel so bad cutting people off because I want like a full-on show and tell, but I know we're trying to do rapid fire round. So, oh, that's so cool. Okay. So my ritual tools change literally all the time. Let me restart my timer for myself. So I can't say that there's any one particular thing that's like essential other than my mind, but I want to show you my new baby that I just got. Her and I are getting married. Okay. Her and I are in the process of really becoming one with each other. And I have been using her I've been sleeping with her scimitar, which is quite dangerous, but there's a thing for the blade, okay? So I'm not stabbing myself. But no, I use her to cut energy from me that I don't want. I use her to cut cords, even just cords to subconscious beliefs or addictions or behaviors that I no longer want to embody. I also use her to carve out space, like carve out liminal space, or to enter a different dimension that I want to sit in for my ritual. So anyways, ooh, I did that with 10 seconds left.
Oh yeah, just saying like number 97, not to fuck with Ivy. Sleeps with that fucking knife under a pillow. Yeah, I got distracted when you asked the question because a giant spider just ran out of my wardrobe. So apparently he wishes to be the tool, the magical tool. But yeah, so I'm really lucky that I have a garden space now, and I would say that if I can count that as a tool, like that is where everything feels like it's most magical. It's protected by the nature of the plants that grow in it. It's a lot of like native hedgerows, spiky things, dog roses, hawthorn, all that kind of good stuff, rowan stuff. And then also on tarot decks, obviously, that tarot deck is pretty essential for me. But in terms of like consecrating and maintaining, I'm not precious. I know there are people with like silk scarves and bags and lovely, gorgeous, wonderful things. I'm clumsy, and my decks are sticky from pub tables and yeah, like just all sorts of stuff. I'll kind of get a Dettol wipe out if I absolutely need to, but they've been rained on and all sorts. So in terms of consecrating, they are, yeah, like Aurora said about like consecrated by using them. I'm grateful. I work with these tools. They are their own things.
Okay, so I do have a few tools. I definitely show them. Cool. So I have this wand that I collected. I actually was working on the park, and this little piece of wood say, hey, we can be friends. And I put my blood in it and other oils, and now we work together. I also have this little tambourine thingy from Buddhism to clean the space and meditate. I have this broom that is actually the broom that we used to clean, and she and I get along, and she not only cleans in the physical world, she also cleans the apartment. And this, I say no substances, but I need to breathe in the chemicals that of incenses, because that's me. I create, I went in a rabbit hole creating my own incenses, and pretty much that's what I need to have. I did it.
You did it. Woo! We did it. We did our 1-minute timers. Oh my goodness. Thank you all so much for being here today. And for everyone watching this video, please go check out all of these wonderful creators. I'll have all their links in the description box below. I have done that tedious amount of work for you guys, so please go check out their channels. Everyone is just so fantastic in their own niches, and I love that we can come together and talk about diverse practices. And I love today that we had a little bit more discussion than previous episodes, where we're really able to get into the nitty-gritty of our differing beliefs and really kind of challenging each other, but still having a respectable conversation. And I really appreciate you all so much. So thank you for being here. Thanks for everybody watching this video. We will see you next year for episode 5. Bye, everybody.